Welcome back to another episode of Coaches on Zoom Drinking Coffee. It is my pleasure to welcome one of my coaches to the show. Aseel and I have worked together this year on my approach to money and my mindset towards building wealth as a coach, and maybe some of the things that have impeded that through a 30-year coaching career. And I kind of wish we had met 30 years ago, but lots of time ahead still. So Aseel, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here to talk about coaching.
Same here, Andrew. And this is such a timely topic. I mean, there's never not a time that people think about money, but more so than ever. And maybe even in a different perspective that this conversation is starting to happen more and more. So really a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, that's great. So maybe you can put a little bit of a frame around how you present yourself in coaching, because in the formal sense, this is new for you, although you've been coaching for a long time around money and mindset. But how are you framing the kinds of coaching you're doing right now?
I used to be a financial planner in the bank prior to becoming a full-time coach and an entrepreneur as of March 1st, ironically. So during the times I worked in the corporate world, my coaching was very pragmatic and like we had to focus on practical and technical aspects of money and investment strategies and tax planning and all sorts of different things in that regards. But the more I spent almost 10 years in the corporate world, and the more I interacted with people in that capacity, the more I realized there's something missing in that conversation that I'd like to create a space for. And that's the psychological and emotional component of people's relationship with money. So I went back to school, and right now I'm a psychotherapist in training because I wanted to approach this topic holistically and really offer a space for people to uncover the abstract limiting beliefs that are sort of the contributing factor to our actions and behaviors. So you can't alter a behavior. Everybody knows that they need to save and invest. Everybody needs to know that they need to eat healthy and exercise. Like, these are things that we just know. Knowing them and doing them, that's where the gap usually is. And I wanted to explore this topic from a deeper context, offering like in the integration of spirituality and philosophy and really understanding what it means to us. And so that's the approach I have today. And I started my company, Holistic Optimal Wealth, to help people uncover their own limiting beliefs with wealth and create a powerful, meaningful, and intentional relationship with money.
Well, that's wonderful. And I know we've talked as we've gone through the coaching sessions together about, how much the story of, even as far back as when we're growing up and what we see in our parents and our friends and the circle of people around us, how much that influences sort of the approach that we take through our lives, which, logically makes sense, but we sometimes don't notice those behaviors and those ingrained beliefs. So, but I want to kind of flip this back on you maybe, is I would imagine that you've been through a journey yourself personally to get to the place to have empathy, to work with other people and help them through the things that are holding them back. So where does this desire to help people deal with money come from in your own life?
So I grew up in a very interesting environment. I grew up in Lebanon. So it's a country that struggles so much economically. My dad was an engineer, and he had a very socialist communist belief system. So he was surrounded by very successful entrepreneurs that were very, very wealthy, but he was always a very average man as far as his wealth was concerned. And he would brag about it because he equated living the way we did to being honest and to be a good person. And there was an underlying tone to suggest that people with lots of wealth are greedy or corrupt. And it was just very interesting to bridge that gap. So I went to a private school back home, not because we could afford it, because my dad worked there and we were able to get our, tuition subsidized, but I was surrounded by rich kids all the time. And I was always made to feel that I'm less worthy, that I'm just less, period. less of a human being almost. So it was very hurtful growing up in that environment, surrounded by people who always look down on you in a way, whether they meant it or not. You know, when you're kids, you don't necessarily understand these things. I was on the recipient end of these types of messages. And you know, our struggles became worse when we came to Canada, and I came here with a single mother. We lived on welfare. I had to go to the food bank. I remember even my prom dress, I couldn't even afford my own prom dress. I had to go to a place that was donating dresses, and it didn't even fit me right. And I was so embarrassed to show up to the prom. And I always felt in that moment that this is just the way it is for us. I didn't, at that moment, it was still very I was still wrapped up in that scarcity mindset and the lack, and I couldn't figure out what's the way out. Ironically, I became a financial advisor not too long after that, and my family was still on welfare. And I felt every day I'd walk in the bank, I'd feel like a fraud having that title, financial advisor. And I'm like, how's that even possible? Like, my family is living on welfare. I'm a financial advisor. So I made a commitment to myself that I'm going to figure this topic out. And I needed to walk the walk and talk the talk, so that when I'm in front of clients talking to them about their finances, I own my advice. And so I made a commitment to do so, and I started reading all sorts of books and started to tackle money from all sorts of angles. Like, yes, I knew the investment piece and the saving strategies, and I studied mutual funds and stock markets and whatnot, but that was not enough. I knew that what was holding me back was just something a bit deeper. So I read Think and Grow Rich, The Art of Money, The Soul of Money, The Energy of Money. I literally have books on every single layer of money. I read over like 40 or 50 books on money in 2 years. So by 28, I bought a condo downtown Toronto. And this was in a time where everybody's talking about millennials' inability to participate in the real estate market and things like that. So it was very interesting, because that was the first milestone for me to prove that, you know, this wealth paradigm that I inherited from my culture, from my upbringing, from my parents, just didn't fit the desires I have for myself and my community. So I started shifting my own beliefs, and then started incorporating this work in the financial planning practices that I have with clients. And now it became a practice on its own. So I diverted from financial planning into financial therapy, because I believe that money has wounds, like infested wounds in us, because it's connected to layers of our identity, our belief systems, who we think we are, who we think we're meant to be in the world, and just layers and layers of complexity. So my goal is now to help people decode the space and navigate it in a powerful, empowering way for them. That's what my story is.
Beautiful. Wow. And your mom's influence on that. Coming here with a single mom to a new country with all of that going on around you, must have been very hard for her as well.
Of course, very hard. And she's very strong. It's very interesting, because my mom is very ironic and polarized, super strong and confident and resilient on one way. And then on the other hand, she also experiences her own victim mentality, living in scarcity and fear. So she represents a really interesting polarity of like strength and fear coexisting.
Yeah. It's interesting, because so many of the coaches I've talked to, and the one that I talk to in the mirror every day, are coaching around the things that almost they, at some point in their life, needed the most help with. Right? That those things that we've gone through, those experiences, if we come out of it with insights and with strength, we almost feel compelled, like it's our duty to help others figure out how to do the same for themselves, right? And so beautiful, the approach that you took. I would have loved to have been in that job interview when you got hired. How you convinced them that you were the candidate to be giving advice, but you've look at what you've turned it into. So it's a beautiful story.
I've always been somebody who looked at myself as a coach and a healer of some sort. And that's why, like, even when I was younger, I always spoke wisdom beyond my years in a way. But it was interesting because I just sort of knew certain things, but I couldn't necessarily apply them or understand them on a conscious level. Like there are certain types of wisdom I would channel into somehow, and learning how to ground that and create a practical practice around it. That's what took and it's a lifelong journey. I don't think it's like I'm here. And I realized, because I had a lot of imposter syndromes at the beginning, I'm like, am I the right person? Is this like, do I have enough education? Do I have enough training? I had a lot of imposter syndrome. And then I realized that the key element to what I do today is not to provide answers per se, but to ask new questions to old problems. That's the difference. I provide that space where I challenge my clients with the questions I ask them, and I help them get to their own truth, because I'm not the person to give you your own truth. I'm the person to create that space for you to explore your own truth. That's the difference. And you explored some of my coaching, so you know that.
I was just going there in my mind, as you know, some of the questions that really had forced me to unlock, you know, some of the stories that had held me back. You know, I remember the conversation around, you know, just, you know, how I saw the world as a young person in a community where I grew up, where, you know, most of the people I hung around with were, you know, lower to middle class living, you know, not in dire straits by any means, but, you know, they had the basics, they were happy, but it was still a challenging life for them and their families. And we were maybe 10, 15 minutes outside that community and lived a different kind of lifestyle, a more comfortable lifestyle. And I always battled with this idea of trying to not show that side of who I was, right? Not be that person as you experienced that made other people feel bad because of what they had. And I was always in this struggle of how to present myself. And so money was always, and maybe it was my perception that money was the thing that might create that chasm between me and the other people, when probably in reality would have had no difference. It was actually about how I treated other people. But yeah, and unfortunately that story became part of me for a long time, of how to live a life and earn a living without it looking like I was doing better than the people around me, which, you know, catches up to you after a while.
Yeah. You know, there's this belief that money changes people. It's as if this is a fact, right? I don't necessarily believe that. I believe it's a myth. And I believe money makes you more of who you are. It doesn't necessarily change you. So if you were already a greedy, selfish person, that the access of money in your life accentuates these particular traits in you. But if you were a loving, giving, nurturing person, then money also accentuates this part. And once you bridge that gap between your values and money, then you create a flow that's truly an extension of who you are, and that's a healthy balance. And I work on this framework of creating this natural flow that represents who we are in the way we earn money, save it, spend it, etc.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed going through that process. I know it was sort of a bit of a pilot process where I got to be the guinea pig, which was great. I always loved, you know, being able to share some value back and forth with other coaches in that way. But it was super powerful for me to go through. And as I said, you know, I hope there's coaches out there watching this who are earlier in their coaching careers or their professional careers. Definitely would suggest talking to Aseel as soon as you can, because when you get that, you know, it's, you know, as you know, I have a sailing background. You know, it's when you get the compass right and you understand the, you know, the stories and all align in the right direction, you know, the boat goes in the right way, no matter what storms and things come at you. And
sure,
you know,
I didn't have the confidence, Andrew, and honestly, you and the people I did this project with gave me that confidence that I needed to launch my own business. And leaving the corporate world on March 1st, time where people are closing their businesses, I started and launched my own. and thanks to you and to so many feedback I was getting along the way. So if any coach is right now, you know, whether you're already a coach or want to be a coach and still in the early stages of figuring that out, I truly suggest putting your ideas in some sort of program and testing it out, getting feedback on it, because we all have an imposter syndrome of some sort. We all have this, I'm not good enough. They have these critical voices in our head. We all do at different intensities. Getting support and getting feedback, I think, is a really cool and integral step in overcoming these hurdles and then building momentum to build on a successful practice from.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And there are a lot of coaches like us out there who would be happy to help a new coach, you know, go through a pilot of a program and and you know, and be the subject of a coaching exercise for sure.
Yeah, I'll love to be subject. If anybody would love to practice, there's areas I'm looking to improve. I mean, once you're in this field and once you're in it, like you love self-development in general, you realize how the more you know, the more you don't know. The more you realize how much you don't know. So it's a lifelong thing, and you're always constantly improving. And shifting and evaluating and reconfiguring. So yeah, coaching never ends.
No. So we shouldn't ignore the fact that we're in this very strange time right now as we're recording this. It's end of April. By the time has changed, how the perception of time has changed. End of April already, and months ahead still of uncertainty for sure in terms of the job market, probably years ahead before things have any sense of normalcy again. How is that affecting the way people are showing up for you and the kind of help that they're asking for?
I'm actually doing a whole bunch of different things, and one of the initiatives I'm doing is pro bono services with Kind Wealth. Actually, David O'Leary spearheaded this initiative, and there's about 20 different financial planners right now and from different trainings that offer complimentary financial consultations. So I get a lot of calls through that, but I also have people reaching out to me directly, and I offer complimentary support from people who are really impacted by the COVID. On the flip side, I also have clients who are really excited about this time, looking at it as an opportunity, looking at it as something that they've been anticipating and they're ready for. So I really feel that I get both worlds. So there's people who are fearful and their jobs are being either eliminated or just put on hold temporary or even restructured. And there's people who are now looking at investment opportunities. What can I do next? How can I use this opportunity not only to survive, but to thrive and build even multi-generational wealth? So there's all sorts of different conversations that I'm being a part of. And what I try to do, depending on the situation, is to bring somebody to the here and now. This is it's actually an anxiety tool to help us bring whatever we're experiencing to the here and now, because often our anxieties are about anticipated future events that are not even happening yet. And when we bring our focus to the here and now, there's so many different techniques to do so. We get clearer on what it is that we're actually fearful of, and then we work through that. And sometimes that exercise on its own has lots of gems in it, in the types of awarenesses it brings up. One of the cool conversations I've had recently is about this person who their job was eliminated, and in exploring so they approached the conversation from a space of fear, like you wouldn't believe, like it's the end of the world. And through talking to them more and more, we came to the conclusion that they never liked that job to begin with. So they're fearful and scared and like in this agony of losing something they never actually wanted. And when I helped them reframe that, the way they looked at this, in a way that the universe just created this beautiful opportunity. You've been so fearful of quitting that job, and now this job just is no longer available for you. If this is not your chance to reinvent yourself, then what is?
Right.
So it's very interesting.
Yeah, it's super interesting, and it's, you're so right. I mean, I'm having the same kinds of conversations with, and it is amazing how a little mindset shift or a little insight shift can open people up to the opportunities that are going to come from all of this versus sort of the limitations that have been created. And but I mean, obviously at the same time, we have to be very honest that there are people whose financial, health wasn't in a good place to start with. And it's interesting. I don't know how you're dealing with this, but I've started doing, I actually did this on myself before I tried it on a client, but it was really to do a scan of all the areas of my life that I was feeling uncertain about going through COVID, right? That I felt uneasy about. And I put those all on one list, and I put the things that I was feeling okay about on another list. And I realized that, in the good times, we have to take care of these things that become vulnerable when things don't go well. And there may never be another time, let's hope, in our lifetimes or our children's lifetimes where they'll go through something like this. But all of those lessons that we were taught about savings and about, having, taking care of your personal health, taking care of your mental health, they show themselves when we're put under stress, right? So, there's also these stories that many of the most successful businesses in the world were created at times of very economic challenge. And so how do you help people kind of, step far enough back from how they're feeling about their bank account or, their company maybe going out of business? How do you get them to step far enough back and see how they can make some adjustments going forward so these are not issues?
Beautiful question. The first thing that's so crucial is the mantra, no shame, no blame. When people are stuck in that shameful and space where they just want to blame somebody for the situation they're in, this is a cycle that's just spiraling downwards. The second we step away from that and sort of make peace with the place we're in right now, like we're here, okay? Whatever spending habits or saving habits or whatever situations happened in the past that brought you here is irrelevant. You're here. Now, obviously, we want to bring awareness to them, to understand them, to bring closure to them so that they're not repetitive subconscious patterns that are just running your life. Obviously, that's where examining the past is important, but bringing all the shame and blame to the present moment and just dwelling on that is not the space to start from. So the way I would address that usually is bringing some compassion and self-love to the present moment, because this is the you want to shift from being this victim stressed out person to a space where you're looking at this as an opportunity to reinvent your life. And then we start exploring and we dig deeper, and it's not a cookie cutter approach. Different people struggle with different areas with money. Some people are great spenders. Great savers. Others don't even spend a single penny and are fearful and hoarders. So there's a whole bunch of different layers to how our different realities is. Bringing awareness to the conversation is key. And then what I try to do is dig deeper in aligning yourself with the flow of money. There's 8 flows of money into your life, and this is where my logo came from. Actually, I created this circle of abundance in the middle, and there's 8 leaves around it that represents earning, spending, saving, borrowing, leveraging, investing, giving, and there's one more. Anyways, so there's 8. And when you start examining each of these areas, what areas right now do not represent the values that I care about and do not represent the things that excite me, then these are areas that are creating imbalances, and then naturally you're gonna feel an overall struggle with the relationship with money. I'll give you an example. If you absolutely hate the job you're in and you feel stuck and you feel like your soul is being sucked out of you every day, in reality, this is the source of money into your life. Your income is coming from a space that you actually hate. Sometimes you justify your spending habits because of the unhappiness you experience at work, you go and spend money in such a way to fill that gap of happiness. And it's called entitlement shopping. So that's when you start justifying the extra pair of shoes you just bought, although you didn't need it, or the expensive dinners, or the money that just is wasteful and mindless consumed. Mindless consumerism is now justified in your mind because you're lacking happiness from an area, and you just want to fill that gap somewhere else. When you create that connection, you start realizing, okay, well, if I start developing a way where I can respect money, then that gap starts to close. Because there's another concept called mental accounting, where people actually value money differently depending where it comes from. So if you have different sources of income in your life, you tend to treat that money and spend it differently. Although it doesn't make sense. $100 made in a wage, if you earn an income, is the same $100 earned in an investment, for example, from a face value perspective. But in our minds, it's not the same at all. So we spend it differently. So bringing awareness to these conversations is a really cool way for helping people navigate it.
That's awesome. Yeah. So that's the sort of, you take people through an assessment of those 8 areas as part of sort of getting a sense of where their values and stories related to money land.
Yeah. That's one exercise out of many. There's like so many different exercises I do. And that's after I evaluate where's somebody's struggle. Yeah. So for others, it could be a money story. They have this limiting belief about what money and wealth is. Like a client recently whose money story was, once I have money, there's nothing else I would live for. Like if I have lots of money, I'm going to start being bored with my life. So every time he made money, he found a way to lose it subconsciously, because he equated making money to giving him purpose. And he was fearful that if he had money, he'd lose purpose. It's fascinating how these links in our head work.
Absolutely. Yeah. What a gift to be able to help people through that. So it's beautiful. Yeah.
It gives me the deepest fulfillment. I really thoroughly enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, look, this has been wonderful to catch up again. We are going to stay in touch in many different ways, I know, going forward. As I mentioned to you before we started recording, I'd love to have you come back and be part of one of our panel discussions around, mindset and about how to help people through challenging times, because I think your psychotherapist back training combined with having these conversations about one of the most stressful topics for most humans is so powerful in terms of understanding how we can help humans kind of proceed and make progress through this difficult time. So thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure, Andrew. It's always a pleasure connecting with you. You're a kindred spirit, and I love that we're on a similar wavelength and we offer support to each other. So I value your friendship and your support deeply. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And all the best. Stay safe, and we'll be in touch soon.
Of course.
Okay.
Have a good day.
You too.
And abundantly.
Trying my best.